Welcome back to our news bulletin. In occupied Kashmir, Indian troops have martyred 3 more Kashmiri youths in the Rajouri district. The youths were martyred by the troops during a violent military operation in Nowshehra area of the district. According to reports, occupation troops cordoned off the area after the incident. In the month of May alone, Indian forces have martyred 21 civilians in the occupied valley. Kashmir has been under a strict lockdown and communications blackout since August last year. Now, Pakistan has condemned India's decision to declare 2 of its staffers at the High Commission in New Delhi persona non grata on allegations of spying. Islamabad also summoned an Indian diplomat to lodge a strong protest over the move. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the 2 officials were lifted by Indian authorities on Sunday on false and unsubstantiated charges. It said they were later released on the High Commission's intervention. The Air Force said the Indian action was in clear violation of the Vienna Convention as well as the norms of diplomatic conduct. New Delhi had accused the Pakistani officials of espionage and asked them to leave the country within 24 hours. Pakistan already downgraded its diplomatic relations with India last year after the illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir in August. For more on this issue, we have with us Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan. Thank you, Mr. Aizaz Ahmad Chaudhry, for your time. Now, Mr. Chaudhry, what is India's objective behind these actions, coupled with its continuous ceasefire violations across the line of control and the working boundary?
Thank you very much. Well, I personally think that there could be a number of objectives that India wants to achieve. One would be that, as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan has indicated, that this could be part of a negative, pre-planned and orchestrated media campaign, which in turn is part of a persistent anti-Pakistan propaganda. That Pakistan is sending spies. So this was part of that propaganda that has already been launched. The second could be that not only that they were declared PNG, but I understand from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs response that they were detained, they were tortured, they were even threatened and pressured to accept false charges. So this is part of a behavior which is uncivil, I would say, and perhaps they wanted to send a message to Pakistan and the world that India could now go into even uncivil behavior. The third message perhaps could be that they might be deflecting attention from host of internal and external issues that BJP government is now facing, especially in Kashmir, occupied Kashmir, as well as in the line of actual control, as well as in various parts of the country where BJP Hindutva policies are eliciting a lot of reaction. My sense is that the world would be able to see through the Indian plans, and it will not really be productive for India.
Part of negative pre-orchestrated media campaign. Now, Mr. Chaudhry, New Delhi is already a target of global criticism due to its actions in occupied Kashmir and racist laws. Has Narendra Modi damaged India's international image beyond repair?
It appears that heading straight into that direction where India is losing its credibility. Prime Minister Modi has done something that nobody could do before him, which is that he has torn apart the veneer of democracy and pluralism that the Indians had stitched together. And he's also doing it in a blatant fashion, blatant in the sense that even for this act, for example, no evidence was provided. Now, this has been a standard practice for India to cast allegation without providing any evidence. Now, this time the allegation was that they were indulging in espionage activities. and were obtaining documents about India's security establishment. Excuse me, in this age of transparency where everything is available now online, almost everything, and whatever you say or do is there in half an hour outside, why would any person go to an unknown person taking documents? How would that serve? So I think the credibility gap that Modi government has created is unprecedented, and I think it's damaging India's status as a country in South Asia.
This was Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, former Foreign Secretary. Thank you for your time. Now, for more on this pressing issue, we have with us Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi, Defence Analyst. Thank you, Mr. Naeem Khalid Lodhi, for your time. Now, what is India's objective behind these actions, coupled with its continuous ceasefire violations across the line of control and the working boundary?
Right. If you just look at the last year, Indians have faced a series of diplomatic and military embarrassments. First, of course, the Pulwama incident, and then what they did, made an attempt to come across our air limitation. And then what happened with Nepal, and now, Ladakh, whatever is happening in occupied Kashmir. So it is embarrassment after embarrassment, and they are confused. They don't know what to do, and I think. Of course, the smaller countries, they cannot react like Nepal and Sri Lanka and all those things. Against China, they are now facing a huge military embarrassment. With Pakistan, they have their own problems in this region. So I think it is just out of frustration, I would say, and there's no logic behind it. And I don't see any cogent reason for doing all this. Normally, countries do not resort to such sort of things. With the diplomats or people having diplomatic immunity and passports and all that. I don't know what is going on. The only thing which I can assess is they're getting imbalanced because of all these things that I mentioned.
Now, General Lodhi, New Delhi is already a target of global criticism due to its actions in occupied Kashmir and racist laws. In your opinion, do you think Narendra Modi has damaged India's international image beyond repair?
I think event after event, Modi is doing that. Enough embarrassment he was facing, whatever they were doing in Indian occupied Kashmir. Second big embarrassment, of course, militarily they are facing in Ladakh. And now this and whatever they have done with their own citizens. I mean, all the minorities, they are fed up. Look at the Citizen Act, and now also whatever they are doing, trying to change the population in Kashmir. So all these things are piling up, and everybody is pointing fingers at them. Everybody is trying to make them realize about their mistakes. But as they say, that once you start making blunders, then there's always a cascade of blunders, and that is what they are involved in.
This was Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi joining us live. Thank you for your time. Now, we go to the US, where violence continues in cities across on the 6th night of protests sparked by the death of African-American George Floyd in police custody. Curfews have been imposed in nearly 40 cities, but people have largely ignored them, leading to tense standoffs. Riot police clashed with protesters in several cities, firing tear gas and pepper bullets to try to disperse the crowds. Police vehicles were set on fire and shops were also looted in several cities. At least 4,400 people have been arrested over several days of protests. President Donald Trump has said the U.S. will designate the anti-fascist group Antifa a terrorist organization. For more on this issue, we have with us Dr. Darren Porcher, criminal justice expert from New York. Thank you for your time. Now, Dr. Porcher, has racism made a comeback in the U.S. under President Donald Trump, or are we looking at a bigger problem here because it never left?
I don't want to say it's solely shouldered by Donald Trump, because when we look at the aspect, or I want to say the systemic problem of racism, it's something that's been in the United States for years on end. So I don't want to say that he quote unquote fanned the flames, because when we look at the case of the officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota, he clearly didn't fall within the purview of Donald Trump. He was employed by the municipality of Minneapolis. So I see that more as a systemic problem within that organization or that police department. And we need to really take a hard look at how policing is conducted in these individual police departments. I think I'm one of the firm proponents, and then there should be a national standard, and that national standard should fall within the purview of the federal government. But that has something that's yet to happen as a result.
Systemic problem of racism in the U.S. Is the African American community looking for retribution and justice for George Floyd, or do they seek broader anti-racism police reforms?
Well, I think it's a combination of what you just mentioned. The African-American community seeking retribution. That retribution they're looking for from the perspective of imprisonment of not just the officer that was responsible for having his knee on George Floyd's neck, but also the co-conspirators. When I say the co-conspirators, meaning the officers that were standing on side. But in addition to that, the African-American community is also looking for legislation or systemic change to not just policing, but I think socioeconomics in general in connection with the United States. Because when we look at what happened, this police incident, this horror police incident, I think that this is merely a symptom of a greater problem. And that greater problem is socioeconomics. Socioeconomics have plagued the United States for African Americans for a long period of time. And one of the things we recently been able to accept, or I should say view through the lens of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had disproportionately higher numbers of African Americans that have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But this all is attributed to the communities of color being socially economically impoverished. And so once again, it goes back to the police, I should say hyper-aggressive policing and COVID-19 are just merely symptoms of a larger problem, which is socioeconomics.
A larger problem stemming from socioeconomic differences. Now, Mr. Porter, how likely is rioting between protesters and Trump's right-wing white supremacist fan base?
Well, when we take in consideration of rioting, I can pinpoint it to this particular case. We're primarily finding that these are people that have a sentiment for the African American community. Do you have rioters that are in place, or I should say protesters that are touting the Trump agenda? You see that happening in many of the states in terms of the stay-at-home orders that have been implemented as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you have two different agendas, and based on the two different agendas, you're going to have two different sets of personnel that are looking to advance their agenda. But I don't really see Trump rioters that are participating in the riots or the protests in connection with George Floyd.
This was Dr. Darren Porter joining us from New York. Thank you for your time. Now, in another news, China has threatened to retaliate against what it calls U.S. attempts to harm Chinese interests. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Washington's measures over Hong Kong interfere with Beijing's internal matters. He said the move will damage relations between U.S. and China, and Beijing will resolutely defend its security and development interests. Zhao said both countries stand to benefit from bilateral cooperation. Zhao also criticized recent curbs by Washington on Chinese students and companies. We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. The daily death toll from the coronavirus in the U.S. has fallen to 598 as the tally crossed 104,000. Worldwide, the death count has crossed 372,000 with over 6.1 million infections. Further details in this report.
The Americas are now the epicenter of COVID-19 as the number of cases in Latin America crossed 1 million. The death toll in the region has also crossed 50,000. In Chile, health officials say they are taking all necessary measures to curb the spread of the virus.
We know we are enduring the most difficult weeks. We have had an important increase in the number of people infected, and therefore, we have strengthened all the measures that we have been implementing of our plan COVID-19.
In Russia, residents of Moscow have been allowed to go out for a walk for the first time in more than 2 months, while the UK is also preparing to relax its lockdown despite concerns by the government's scientific advisory body.
We're transitioning from level 4 to level 3. The reason that we can take the steps we're taking now is based on the cumulative advice that we've had from SAGE, from the medical community, and we would have taken more steps if we could have done, but we're taking very cautious steps.
Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan is mulling reopening its border to visitors from countries with low cases, including Australia, Thailand, and New Zealand. However, a record 40 people died in Bangladesh overnight as the country lifted lockdown after more than 2 months.
In Pakistan, the death toll from COVID-19 has surpassed 1,500 as 60 people died in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says nearly 3,000 more infections were reported, with the total over 72,000. The ministry said more than 26,000 patients have recovered across the country. It said the province of Punjab recorded the highest number of cases yesterday with 497. The ministry said over 14,000 tests were conducted in the past 24 hours. Today, Prime Minister Imran Khan will preside over a crucial meeting of the National Coordination Committee to discuss a sudden rise in cases. The meeting will decide the future strategy, though the government has already said a lockdown option is not under active consideration. Saudi Arabia says it has intercepted and downed 2 armed drones launched by Houthi rebels. State media says the unmanned aerial vehicles were heading towards the southwestern city of Khamis Mushaib. Meanwhile, the Houthis have accused the Saudi-led coalition of killing 4 civilians and wounding 22 others in Hodeidah. The Houthi military said the coalition conducted 22 air raids on the province in the past 24 hours. They accused the coalition forces of repeatedly violating the UN-brokered ceasefire in Hodeidah. European stock markets are trading mixed as lockdown measures ease across the continent. However, investors are treading cautiously as violent protests continue throughout the US. Frankfurt's DAX has lost over 1.5%. CAC 40 in Paris is trading over 1% higher. London's FTSE 100 is trading about 1% higher. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index led the gains, closing over 3% higher. Seoul's Kospi and Shanghai Composite gained ground. Nikkei 225 gained nearly 1%. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil has gained a fraction, shedding early losses. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.tv.